Welcome to the September Chairs Breakfast. I remind everybody that we are being recorded. So if you're going to sit in the cheap seats back there, make sure when it comes your turn that you speak loudly so we can hear what's going on. I have just a couple quick things to say, and then we'll start over here with Brian, and as usual, zip around the room. Looks like we'll end with John Crassie this morning. So, number one, if you have openings on your committee for members, please be in touch directly with the select board liaison. If you don't know who it is, if you go to the select board online, concordma.gov, you'll see a list there. If you have concerns or questions, call me or shoot me a note, and I'll try to help. So this is the time of the year when we want to try to get ourselves staffed up pretty effectively as we start to hit later in the fall and we get into warrant period and stuff like in hearings. We want to make sure everybody's up to speed. Second, open meeting law. Lots of changes always in the open meeting law rules and regulations. It's tricky sometimes, especially if your committee doesn't deal with things like that a lot. If you have any questions on open meeting law, Dean, call the town clerk. She's the resident authority on town clerk. If she has any questions on it, she'll call town council for you and get some kind of ruling. So if you're not familiar with it, everybody who signed up for a committee should have gotten some kind of handbook. And there's a piece in there on meeting law. If you have questions, just give Carrie a call. She's very knowledgeable about that kind of stuff. And segue into my last item on November 2nd. Every fall for the last 5 or so years, we've had an educational program for members of committees. And again, we'll have that this year here in the townhouse, November 2nd. It'll begin at 9 o'clock. We'll have refreshments, and then the program will actually begin at 9:30. The program is going to consist of 3 parts. The first is going to be open meeting law and open records law changes and updates from the town clerk. And then the second component of the program will be a discussion about town meeting from the town moderator, Carmen Reese. And the purpose of that, that particular section is to sort of let committees know what their obligations and responsibilities are for town meeting with respect to warrants and public hearings. A little bit about what the dates are and that kind of stuff, but mostly just to make sure you understand what your committee should and can do with the town meeting schedule. Yeah.
When will that conclude?
It'll conclude, it's scheduled to conclude about 11:45, but it might, we'll be out of there by noon for
The
sure.
light plant is planning a big ride and drive event at the high school same day.
Yeah, and so we'll be out of there by noon, and if you need to bolt to get out, and the last part of it I'm going to do is called, for lack of a better word, effective meeting management, and then colon, what could possibly go wrong. So that's the tag that we've used for the last 4 years. So it'll be the first part of that will be, some tips on effective meeting management, and then the second part really will be questions and answers. What if you encountered a problem that you didn't know what to do with, or something like that, and you have a lot of folks in the audience, and so somebody will say, "Oh yeah, we dealt with that last week, and here's what we did," or something like that. So, did you have a question? No. Okay, so that's November 2nd. I think if you're new to it, I think it's been a pretty good session. Get a chance to meet a lot of folks, and so that's an update I've got. And Dean, you walked in, so you sat in the catbird seat. So
Okay.
you're up first.
All right. The Finance Committee's been in its quiet period. At the end of July, which is since the last time we've gotten together, we issued out what we call our informational letters. Those go out to the town manager, to the superintendent, and to the Minuteman, requesting, basic information about how they expect their budget formation to flow in the coming fiscal year. This year we did something a little new. We're incorporating into that letter our new sustainable growth rate concept. We voted in the prior year as to how we would come up with a calculated number. And the thing that the Finance Committee is trying to do with this is try to sort of, set a, kind of a forward-looking expectation for how to keep the town's budgets within a reasonable and sustainable rate of growth. We've seen sort of this increasing or hockey stick-like increase in taxes. These are, of concern in various cohorts within the community. They have we run the risk as taxes rise more than inflation or more than some folks can afford, of really changing the makeup and the character of the town. And so we're concerned a little bit about that. And we publish a forward-looking number to try to keep commitments that town departments or the schools are making, which are multi-year commitments. So if you lock in a rate in a collective bargaining situation, that you now come back for the next 2-3 years and say, well, we can't do anything about this, which is a huge component of our budget because we locked that in 2 years ago. So we're trying to create a forward-looking expectation. We call it the sustainable growth rate. That was included in this year's informational letters. So we're going to be going into our heavy window of meetings. We'll be meeting almost every week between October and November as we do our regular process of setting guidelines for the town budgeting entities. So that's us.
Thank you. Ron?
The Climate Action Advisory Board is tonight. We'll be meeting in this room to kick off our climate action planning. We received a grant to hire consultants, KLA, for them to come in and help us for the next 10 months or so create this document. And it really is the next step. So we've set goals and targets and visions, but this is more about organizing the practical tasks that can get us to our carbon reduction goals.
Great, thank you.
I'm Luis Perez-Petty. I'm the Secretary of the Historic Districts Commission, and I'm here representing its chair, Peter Novelli. The HCC has had a very busy schedule since the beginning of the year. We just finished approving the project for the expansion of the Concord Library, which was a long and a careful process. We are also very much engaged in expanding the historic districts, for which there's a segment between Sudbury Road and Thoreau Street, which is being actively considered. And we also have been approached by neighbors in Hubbard Street, which would like to be considered to be included in a historic district. So we're all working with the neighbors and the community in those issues, and we hope that the historic districts eventually will be expanded and that this will represent a significant asset to the community. Other than that, we have been fully staffed, which is quite surprising, and we continue working in some other issues, and important one is to try to set a set of guidelines or standards by which the changes that are involved in the historic districts are assessed. We're trying that the process will be transparent and that will be objective, trying to avoid things like I really don't like this door or this window, you see, etc. And try to refer it to a set of guidelines and references, you see. And this is a complex process because it involves trying to determine what makes something historic. And that is a very difficult question. Thanks.
Thank you, Gary.
Gary Kleiman, new chair of a new committee, the Nuclear Metals Inc. StarNet Reuse Committee. As you may or may not be aware, close to the Maynard-Acton border, Concord has a Superfund site, 44 acres, that has been being cleaned up since 2005, I think, but really significant progress has been made since 2011, and we now have a essentially clean 44-acre parcel The final phase of cleanup, which will involve removing the foundations and some of the remaining contaminated soil and replacing it with about 10 feet of clean soil so that it's up to residential standards. The final phase requires that the town, if we want to consider becoming owners of this parcel in the future and have the availability to redevelop it, we need to identify what potential uses or how, have a plan for how the site might be used in the future. So our committee, which has just been formed, is going to host an open public forum on October 17th. It's a Thursday night from 5 to 9 p.m., 5 to 7 or 7 to 9, whatever people can make. And it will be in the town hearing room here. So your homework is for your committee to think carefully about a site and how redevelopment might help or address any of the issues or concerns of any of your committees. And the committee has already identified some principles for redevelopment and more than a dozen potential uses. And we want to inform everybody so that we all can have a voice in how this parcel gets redeveloped. So please think about if there's a liaison or somebody on your committee that could come to our meeting October 17th, either 5 to 7 or 7 to 9, and just become informed on our process and weigh in. It'll be probably 18 months to sort of identify what the right combination of uses are that would serve the town.
That's very important for the town, as you know, since y'all live here. A lot of open space is a pretty scarce commodity around the place. And this has been going on for a long time. Previous committee called the 2229 Main Street Committee, working with the EPA to get them to get this up to residential standard.
Yeah.
And that's happening, as Gary pointed out, and now we've really got to come forward and figure out, well, what are we going to do with this parcel? And as Gary mentioned, the town at some point will be considering whether it wants to take ownership. There's some issues of liability and there's the liens on the property, so it's not a straightforward thing. The precursor to it is to have a good idea of how the land could be used. So input to Gary's committee is really important, and these forums are really important so that we get a really broad window into what our opportunities are. So thanks, Gary. Please.
Good morning, I'm Kristen Ferguson, Vice Chair of the Planning Board, and I'm here for Matt Johnson today. We're continuing to work on our proposals for changes to the bylaws that Matt's probably mentioned before. The big ones are accessory dwelling units and two-family dwelling units. We're looking for some changes to the planned residential developments within town, and then also kind of what they might look like out of town. Those are kind of the main things we're going to be tightening up before fall. We did receive, or the planning department did receive, a $40,000 grant for a potential Thoreau Depot equitable transit-oriented development. So it's like a 40R project. So we received that grant from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. And so we're going to take a look at, how that area, what are some ways that we could make that kind of more vibrant and more of these mixed use as perhaps an overlay district. So I think that's kind of the new and exciting thing coming up so far. Related to the two committees here about the library, we did just see the library project, and the planning board had a lot of questions about sustainability. And we do have some criteria, and it's really important to have objective criteria that we could kind of send them back with certain conditions so that that building, this renovation, can really be this example of how you take old architecture and still preserve it and have it beautiful, but have it functioning as modern and energy efficient as possible. So there was quite a bit of discussion, and hopefully not the end of it. And then the last thing is just to touch on your initial point. We are looking for another member for our planning board, and we have not had any luck. And one of the questions is, I believe that once someone serves on the planning board, they are no longer able to serve. They've done their 5-year term, they can no longer come back. And we were wondering if that was prohibiting people from applying. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that or has any other comments on that.
Well, it's not a law. It's much as just Concord's tradition. tradition of once you've done your service on a committee, you step aside, let somebody else come on. Serving on two committees, not having people who are residents serving on town committees. So that's called administrative policy number 10.
Okay.
I think what you might do or have Matt do is come into the townhouse and I'll let Jeremy introduce himself a little bit later, Jeremy or Chris, go over the green cards that they have organized by committees and see what we've got in there. So
Okay.
let's slide in the back. And, hi, good morning.
Does the library have a new date? Could you,
A new date for a meeting
did you get approved?
to get approved? I'm not sure yet. I know they were getting ready to go to the zoning board of appeals, and I think that was happening last week. But our recommendation was not quite ready for them. We had met about it last Tuesday. They were meeting with the ZBA on Thursday, and all the I's have not been dotted yet.
Good morning, I'm Susan Livingston, I'm a member of the Board of Assessors, and I'm here on behalf of the chair. And I don't have anything to report. Summer is our quiet time, and we make up for it in the winter. And we do have a meeting this week, Thursday night.
So you're coming before the select board on early in November to with the assessor to talk about setting various tax rates coming up. So good morning. Yes.
I'm Jim Burns from Concord Housing Development Corporation. The CHCC has each of its members cycle through this, so I represent everyone at the moment or no one, I'm not sure. No, actually everyone. I was here in March and I talked about the two basic issues, and CHCC is working with the first of which is Junction Village, which is the land in which we hope to have an 83 unit property established, which is down by the railroad tracks off of Commonwealth Avenue. And previously, an application was sent to the Department of Housing and Community Development to get funding to do that project. It was turned down. And then more recently, in February, I believe it was, the Grantham, which is the company that's going to build the units, submitted a second request for money. It was turned down in July. I'm not close enough to be able to read some of these things, but the people who are, so I'm now going to say what they've mentioned is a series of questions were asked by the people who reviewed the application request for money, and they're very detailed, which led the individuals to believe that the next opportunity to request money will be successful, because it wasn't as if the application was dismissed. It was that there was some more information that they requested, which will be provided, and that should be sometime in February in order to get some money. The problem, of course, is that another part of the project is that there's the surrounding property has to be cleaned up and work has to take place there. And there's plans to do that, but it won't be put into action until the money is provided to make sense. So the final thing is that we call it Junction Village. However, Grantham is going to change the name of the building, the Christopher Heights of Concord. Sounds pretty good, I guess. But they have 4 other similar facilities, 2 of which I can think of, which one is in Marlborough and one of which is in Worcester, and 2 closer to Rhode Island. And they seem to use that as their operating name. The second activity, which in fact is really pleasant to be able to talk about, is there was quite a bit of work that started right about a year ago in order to acquire a property at 930 Main Street. A woman who lived there had offered it initially at what she thought would be an affordable housing price, although the price was never defined. And when I was here in March to talk about this, it looked as if we would be able to go forward and perhaps obtain that property. It fell apart, and probably for a couple of reasons, most likely cost. Perhaps our initial bid wasn't satisfactory. Nevertheless, quite a bit of work took place. First of all, there was a collaboration that was formed between Concord Housing Development Corporation, the Concord Housing Foundation, and Habitat for Humanity together to acquire funds. Quite a bit of funds were acquired. And then after our initial attempt to get the property was turned down, Lee Smith and Elizabeth Russ put a lot of effort into contacting the owner of the property, trying to understand what the issues were. And the good news is, let me get the date right. The good news was August 20th. The deed was signed and CHDC owns the property. And
Yes, there was a contribution by the town.
oh, absolutely. Yes.
Through
yes,
the
yes.
warrant article that was approved at town meeting last year,
Right.
Article 23, which allocated $500,000 from free cash to these kinds of.
I think that more or less 225 was more or less what the town provided. 75,000 from. Actually, the number I gave you was wrong. I'm trying to add
Sorry.
numbers in my. But anyway, money came from the town, from Habitat for Humanity, and for the Concord Housing Foundation. And in fact, so the building, we now own the property, and there's some work that has to go on in order to get it into a position of which we will turn it over to Habitat for Humanity, who will make some modifications and turn a 1 unit to a 2 unit property. So therefore, once everything is taken care of, there will be 2 units that will be added to the Concord's inventory of affordable housing.
Super, thank you. And also, I would just say that Liz Rusk, our Regional Housing Authority officer, will come to the select board to talk about Junction Village. We're all very optimistic that this next round will provide the funding, and we'll still be within the time frame of getting permits and that these units would count toward Concord. So slow, but still progress. Pat, we'll go around. Melissa, you're up next. We're just going to zip around and grab the people in the cheap seats. You're up. Good morning, Melissa.
No, I'm Melissa Salter, I'm chairman of the Historical Commission. Some things to report on. One of the things we are working on is to review the demolition delay bylaw of the town of Concord. So we have been researching townships around the Commonwealth and seeing what they do, trying to determine where our law may be weak, how we could clarify some of the definitions, what can be improved, ultimately to present at town meeting. I'm not sure when, probably not this spring, because it's pretty comprehensive. Another thing is the Wheeler Harrington House, which became a part of the town ownership in 1974, actually, which is what spurred the creation of the Historical Commission. We're working with the NRC, which actually has the title of ownership of the house, to better manage the property. We'd had a family there for about 30 years and got a little loose on oversight. So that is very important, and we now have 2 tenants there. We are also looking to revamp our oral history program, which is a distinguished history here in Concord. But we will be working with the library director and the new curator there to come up with a better program. That there have been some issues with the people who have been conducting the interviews. It will continue to reside, the product itself, at the library. We too are looking for another associate member, and I will be in touch with our liaison for the select board, Susan Bates, but also we know to kind of look out on our own to recruit. We have gone through the green card, so we'll be working on that. Ongoing is the Historic House Marker Program, which we administer, and the other thing is we need to update this document, which was a Historic Resources Master Plan. This is kind of the Bible that we start with for identifying the historic resources of the town of Concord, not just homes, but buildings, structures. It was actually typed, if you can remember what a typewriter was. So it doesn't exist digitally, so that's number 1, in addition to doing another inventory of all the resources. It really has been an important document. So that's about it.
Could I? Oh, I'm sorry, before you do that. Related to your oral history project, one of the things I was thinking about when I was reading the master plan is there a way we can kind of tie in our high schoolers who have a lot of experience with digital, recording. They could even do videos. Could we employ them to gain experience and then do that?
Actually,
I just think that they could.
Well, in talking with Carrie Cronin at the library and even thinking about the new project of the library, they're gonna have kind of a media studio there, and we had
Great.
talked about doing just that. The thing of it is, we want professionals to run the program. The high school kids are great to help with the audio portion of it and uploading that, but we want professional interviewers
Okay.
to conduct the interviews and do the editing. That has been one of the principal objections to what's been going on. We've had a couple that have come up here from Virginia who do this, and then they just turn the tape on and people ramble. And that's just transcribed. And that's really, it could be done much better. Under the original founder of this, Renee Garlick, they were really quite excellent. And we want to get back to that. But what you're talking about is exactly what we would like to do.
No, that's great. I just think it's a great opportunity to kind of pass on that tradition and employ a lot of the skills that, I think many of them probably have professional quality skills. Maybe not interviewing yet, but they can certainly do the research and the editing.
Oh, I'm sure.
We need to move on. Please.
Hi, I am Alicia Hesse-Cleary, and I'm a member of the Concord Community Cultural Council, which is part of the Massachusetts Cultural Council. So we give away the grants for art organizations, or to art organizations. And I am subbing in for Tom Martin, the chair. So I'm gonna read his notes that he sent me. So right now, we have a total of $7,884 for granting, as he puts it. As of from last year, there were 29 grants approved. If I will give you a definition of the art organization. So it can be any modality, which means music, dance, movement, any of the mediums of the arts can apply for these grants. So in this fall season, we have to finalize the paperwork from last year. So we're in that process right now that's required by the state and the town. And then we're also teaming up to send out announcements about grants for the following year. So, for example, 18 applicants last year were reimbursed so far for $4,434. And we still have 11 applicant reimbursements remain outstanding. So we have to go and chase down the organizations who we gave the grants to who still have not gotten the money. So those are some of the activities that we're involved in right now. We will have the Concord Journal will be placing an announcement with them about the upcoming grants. So if you're wondering where you find out about the information, you can go to the website, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, but we will be making that announcement. We do that every year, so it's just a routine announcement. And our initial meeting for the fiscal year was on September 4th. Again, that's where we reviewed the status of last year's grant cycle. Our next meeting is scheduled for October 2nd, and it's at 6 o'clock in the Hunt Recreation Center conference room.
Thank you. David?
Hi, David Carr, Chair of the Tax Fairness Committee. So we have completed our work on a new version of the means-tested senior exemption. To review, that's the exemption the town put in a couple of years ago, and we've had 1 year of it, which for people with if you meet certain income requirements and certain house value requirements and so forth, you can get quite a deep discount off your real estate taxes. We have, I think, 49 people who did this last year. So the thing is that the act expires after 3 years, the one that we have right now, and we want to make this permanent, so we have to put in a replacement, renewal, revision, whatever it's going to be. And we have our, and while we're at it, we fixed a few technical issues that have been causing the assessor some grief trying to bid for this thing. So I think we fixed those, and we're ready to present that on Monday. And I need to send you the documents. I think that'll be today, directly to, I've asked who.
You send it to me, I'll make sure it gets where it goes. So they'll be coming to the select board to talk about this on Monday. And I just heard from Senator Barrett's office yesterday, we have to go through the process just like we did before.
Okay, so the form that we have it written in right now is the form that we want to present. Okay.
We were hoping we could get away with maybe an amendment to it, but. Morning.
Hi, I'm Mary Beth Barker. I'm sitting in for Jean Goldsberry from the Disability Commission.
And so, a few items, we've been working on a lockbox program, which is similar to the lockbox program that the Council on Aging offers to seniors, in which people with disabilities can have a lockbox put outside their home that the fire department can access in the event of an emergency if they can't be reached or they're not home. The fire department can access the property. In addition, we're working on an adaptive bike program with, in collaboration with some folks from Boston and Kettle Power, making adaptive bikes, mostly tricycles, adaptive recumbent tricycles, available for rental, for use for people with disabilities so that they can enjoy the bike path. So that's in progress. We're also working on a process to streamline the mechanism that people can use to report and have remedied issues of access to buildings where there are barriers and there shouldn't be for people with disabilities. Let's see, we are also down 2 members, and we ran into a similar thing with the limitation on the number of years that you can serve. And there are ways around that. I think you just have to present a reason that to extend somebody's
Well, there are exceptions that can be made.
yeah.
To any of those, because they're just policies and not bylaws.
Right.
And
So
the punchline for all of these exceptions is if you don't have somebody you can serve in town, then we can go to an exception. But what we don't want to do is exclude other people from willingness to serve on
I think
town
the way
committees.
that we did it was that we said that the person that we're extending had a particular
Skill.
knowledge or skill that wasn't available outside.
Now, that's always available if we need some particular
So I'm
skill.
on my-
But again, it's if we can't find it. And right.
Yeah, just think if there's anything else. Which numbers? Oh, we just met with, just wrote a letter of support, we haven't submitted yet, for the outdoor oasis recreation area that's proposed by, which will be located on the property of Minuteman on Forest Ridge Road, which is an outdoor recreation area with universal access.
Minuteman Arc.
Minuteman Arc, I'm sorry. What was I saying?
Minuteman.
Okay, yeah, Minuteman Arc. That would be open to people that live in the community and kind of ties in with some of the trails and walking trails that the Black Birch project has. And I think that's it.
Right. Pat, we'll come back to you.
Okay, I'm Pat Nelson. I'm here for the library committee, sitting in for Tara Edelman, the chair. So the library has been making its way through the zoning board, the planning board, and the HDC, and we're moving towards finalizing everything we need to put in place to move forward with the project. So that's been great. We have hired a new curator, which is great. Anka Voss has accepted the curator position at the library, and as you've heard before, there's a lot going on across town, across committees with things that the library is supporting, like the Oral History Project, and having a new curator is going to be great. Just a point of interest, as we think about the expansion and what it brings to the children of Concord, we've had a record number of kids participating in the summer reading program. There were 387 kids this summer who participated in that program, which is also great. We have recently, in August, taken a sort of off-site, on-site at Minuteman Arc, a little browsing library, so that the clients at Minuteman Arc have access to the library books at Minuteman Arc, which has been a really nice addition to the service that the library offers. There's, and I think the oral history project we've already talked about, and we're in the process, Biddy is meeting to update the 2009 written agreement between the town of Concord and the Library Corporation. And I think that's it.
Thanks, Pat. Deb?
Great. Hi, I'm Dr. Deb Green, Chair of the Board of Health. I have 2 issues to report. First, you are probably all aware that there's Eastern equine encephalitis in the state of Massachusetts, 8 cases identified. There's a 30 to 50% fatality rate, and of those who recover, few have complete neurologic recovery. So this is something that our public health director has been working closely with the arbovirus surveillance program. Currently, Concord is at a moderate risk, that is yellow on this map, but we are surrounded by towns that are critical and high risk. So knowing that mosquitoes don't really obey town boundaries, it's reasonable to assume that theoretically our risk may be higher. Last Friday, we had an emergency meeting to grant waivers to the town, to the schools, so that they could begin some backpack perimeter spraying of the town fields and public parks. We've already recommended closing public parks and curtailing activities after 6 p.m., which is when this particular species of mosquito is thought to start to be more active. There is also information on the town website, I know.
That was, the thumbs up was for the sound going away.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. The backpack and perimeter spraying is not thought to really affect the pollinators. There will be signage at the schools. We think that that will probably start later this week or this weekend. As you can imagine, there are a number of towns and schools interested in having the same service to their facilities. And so that is obviously a concern for parents and schools, and much of what our public health director has been dealing with for the past several weeks. The second issue I would report is that we continue to have discussions regarding e-cigarette use and vaping use. The past month has seen the CDC and the FDA start to investigate cases of severe pulmonary disease associated with vaping. There's been deaths across the country, and now Massachusetts the DPH is requiring mandatory reporting of possible cases of vaping associated pulmonary disease. Given that this has sort of escalated, we are continuing to discuss options for restricting sales in town. I think over the next month we will continue to meet with various stakeholders and leaders in the town, and we plan on holding a community forum, and we'll present our decisions to the select board and to the town in the next month or so.
Do you mind if I
Right.
ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
This isn't related to the 2 topics you brought up, but
Sure.
I know the light plant and well, there's no representation for the light board here, but they have an upcoming meeting to discuss smart meters and radio frequency and health. Has the Board of Health had any discussions related to those kind of topics?
None, that's news to me.
None.
Something that's, I mean, health is a reason to do denial of those, I think, is prohibited.
Well, that's just a topic that they're currently struggling with, and if it's a health issue, I was wondering if the Board of Health had any. Okay,
I haven't heard anything about it, so.
maybe we'll.
Do you have a recommendation, as you have a recommendation for the schools and the parks with the spraying in the back there, do you have a recommendation for the residents and residential properties, or have you gone to that
So, currently the guidelines, from DPH for a town that's at moderate risk is to curtail, residents should curtail activities outside after 6 p.m. and personal protection spraying for, bug spray on yourself. And I just want to caution everyone that spraying the fields or the perimeters of the fields is still not a substitute for putting personal protection on as well. So, and we will likely be following this until the first hard frost, which we anticipate to be probably mid-October. when the mosquitoes would be killed.
Am I remembering correctly, Deb, that as long as our level is moderate, we have control over how we approach it, but if
Yeah.
it gets to be extreme or high, then it's a state issue. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
the towns that are critical and high have had some aerial spraying, and I believe some spraying of neighborhoods by truck. So we have not considered that yet. I think we're being proactive. You know,
Great, thank you. Hopefully we maybe get an early frost.
I know.
Morning.
Rick Eichler, Concord Housing Authority. Our project on Commonwealth Avenue, which is the, relates back to town meeting when we were voted to be given from the town a little piece of the Giroux parcel, which is going to become the park off of Commonwealth Avenue at the end of the current end of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So we're working on, while we're waiting for the town to get through the hurdles involved in transferring that property to us, we are working on the funding for that project. So we received from the select board commitment for design funds for the project up to $50,000 contingent on the parcel being transferred. And we'll be applying, if we haven't already, to the community preservation for funds.
Friday.
Yeah, so it sounds like we haven't actually submitted it yet. But anyway, the board approved our application so that Mary Ann can send it in. The executive director can send it in. So I'll be meeting with her after this and check and see if that's in or going in. I'm sure it is.
Correct.
So that would, if that's approved, we'll have a commitment for construction funding. So we'll just be waiting on, I mean, really, I suspect the biggest holdup is the state approving of a crossing of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which is really their easement. Railroad easement is actually theirs that the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is on. So the ability for us to build this little house depends on the access to Giroux Park going over the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. But assuming all that happens, we'll eventually have a little extra house on Commonwealth Avenue right next to our existing house on Commonwealth Avenue. So if anybody sees a project referred to as 365, 367 Commonwealth, instead of the Giroux house on, we're going to be calling it 365, 367 because that'll be its address. And in addition to all the property management that we do, we're also in the process of we're repositioning our 18 federal houses to local units. So it's really just changing them from the federal public housing program to the federal Section 8 program. But it's a lot of work, so we're working on that. But that the town will be getting 2 extra units on their SHI from our Commonwealth project. And then once we get local control over the 18 federal units, there are a couple of those properties that we can add extra units onto.
So I know
we'll be
that's a lot of
picking away
work.
at some infill affordable units.
That's great, a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work for each one of them, but we'll just keep at it.
Good, thank you. Jeremy.
So my name is Jeremy Romano. I'm the new Senior Administrative Assistant for the Town Manager's Office. I started last Thursday, so I've been here for a few days. Part of my role, I replaced Andrew Mara, for those of you who might have interacted with him before. People have referred to me as the new Andrew. If that makes you comfortable, go for it, but Jeremy's also fun. And so I would say, for those of you who don't know, part of my role is supporting the operations of the Board of Selectmen, and then the other part of my role is supporting the general operations of the Town Manager's Office. So I've only been here for a few days, so I don't have a ton of updates, but I would say something that's kind of been, that I've realized and has been brought to my attention in the first few days is that there are a lot of board and committee vacancies. So we're going to be going through the green cards and, these next couple weeks and getting that all sorted out. And I'll be happy to be in touch with any of you if you have any questions or anything like that for me moving forward. But I'm excited to be here and excited to work with all of you.
We're glad you're here too. Okay. Thanks, Jeremy. Your Honor?
I'm John Kratzley and the chair of the Community Preservation Act Committee. So last year, we gave out 1.8 million, and we don't know our number that we'll have yet for a number of different reasons that it gets calculated and we find out later on. But the good news is the state budget, the new budget, does provide, we won't get it this year, but we'll get it next year, an increase in one of the sources of CPC funding, the registry deed assessment at the state registry of deeds. That's going to go up, and that will increase available funding. At the same time, we all know that the number of cities and towns using the Community Preservation Act has also increased. So it's difficult to know how much Concord will get from that registry fee increase. There's also a budget, in the state budget, there was also a budget surplus item that if the budget surplus, which gets calculated at the end of October, is available, we're number 2 after life sciences. We're number 2 to get a potential additional $10 million, but that's a very uncertain number. Applications, as I just mentioned, are due on Friday. The town, Marsha Rasmussen came before us with at least 8 town applications. You folks, of course, have one. Emerson Field Improvements is another town, and there's at least 4 to 6 nonprofits, including Minuteman Arc, for that project that you referenced at their this outdoor play area. So we have site visits scheduled for the 28th, and we'll be meeting then with all the applicants to get our town warrant article pulled together in time in December.
Thank you. And the select board will be meeting on Monday, and one of our agenda items is to sort of supply to the Community Preservation Committee the sort of select board's priorities of the, I think there's something like 8.
Yeah, 8. Yeah, Marcia's memo, I just looked at it, has 8 projects on it. But you add to that the Emerson Field second round of granting.
Well, that's Rich Raines.
Yeah, and the CHA application. So you've got a number of town-related, and I said 4 to 6 nonprofits. So we always have a lot of tough decisions to make.
And a very busy time for the committee in the fall. Thanks, John.
Hi, I'm Andrea Solomon. I'm here for Paul Cook for the Cemetery Committee. And summer is also a quiet time for us, but we met in early September. We're working with the Friends of Sleepy Hollow to work on cleaning more of the gravestones that are starting to deteriorate, and we are also going to make an effort to put more funding toward restoring some of the gravestones that are especially historic, that are beginning to fall apart and have been lacking in attention. And we hear a lot about that from not only Concordians, but people who visit the cemetery who want to see those restored. It is a popular tourist site, so we keep that in mind when we're trying to figure out our priorities for the next year. So the next meeting will continue to discuss priorities we have for the next year, and a lot of it's going to focus on continuing to keep up the grounds and just restore things to more friendly to tourists and easier to get to. And there's a lot of projects that need a lot of money, so we're always trying to prioritize. So.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly, just last Saturday, a very successful Ag Day. I don't know if any of you happened to attend, but it was kind of fun, although it started to rain. That took the fun out of it. Emerson Umbrella had its grand opening on Saturday, so if you haven't had a chance to go over there and check out this new facility, you ought to. It's pretty cool. And I don't have the date, but very soon, so check the official opening of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail.
27th.
27th
at 2 o'clock.
Good, thank you, John. 27th at 2, do you know?
In the parking lot.
Over in West Concord?
In West Concord.
Okay, so
the club car.
Behind the club car, so a very exciting time. That's been a very long process. Marshall Rasmussen and a lot of folks doing a huge amount of work on that, so that'll be kind of fun. Thanks. Anything else? Thank you all very much for coming. We'll see you in October. And Melissa, do you have a minute?